أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الحميد وقوله الحق أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال ربنا الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, today inshallah we'll continue our series of discussions on the topic of Islamic perspective on modern day issues. One of the issues I'm sure you're all very familiar with and we've seen happen right in front of our eyes is the issue of racism, which is a legacy of slavery. It happened and it emerged right in front of our eyes. We saw the consequences. We saw a global movement against it. But rightly, a number of people were pointing their finger at Islam and saying, what is Islamic response to this? What is the teachings of the Holy Ahlul Bayt and the Holy Quran with regards to racism and with regards to slavery? And we find in Rasala's reference to freeing slaves and mention of slavery on a number of occasions. So what is the Islamic perspective? Inshallah, today we'll try to touch on it in the limited time that we have. And we hope that we'll do justice to the topic. Before we begin, let us just quickly recap on the Western journey with regards to slavery. The West abolished slavery. The UK abolished it in 1833 with a bill which was passed by the British Parliament, and the US adopted the 13th Amendment in December 18th, 1865. So about 200 years. It's been roughly about 200 years within which the slavery has been abolished. Allama Tabatabai observes that yes, on the surface it would appear that slavery has been abolished. He says there's a new kind of slavery that exists in this day and age. He says no, rather than in the past where individuals were enslaved, today whole nations are enslaved, whether it's through the debt that those nations take on or whether some other kind of pressure that is applied to them. So whole nations are enslaved through this today, rather than slavery as we saw it historically. We can also see that poverty exists where people are still having to sell sometimes their children, sometimes themselves, to meet their basic needs. So whilst politically and legally slavery has been abolished, practically it still exists in our society. And it's not a criticism of the West, and it is a criticism of all humanity today. We have child soldiers that are captured and then turned against their own people. We've seen the stories in Africa, we've seen the stories in Syria, and to some extent in Iraq as well. Young boys turned against their own people. They're captured and then brainwashed to go and kill their own people. But to be fair to the West, they have made great strides. They did elect a black president in the US. However, what we saw over the last couple of years was an acknowledgement that whilst on the surface of it, the slavery has been dealt with, underneath at an individual level, some of those issues still persist. And as we've always observed, Islam is very much a bottom-up. It tries to influence the individual. And once it's influenced the individual, it says, now go and influence those around you and go and influence your direct family and your direct society. So it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down legislative approach. But I think it's fair that we should discuss this topic and explain and provide an explanation of Islam's approach to both slavery and to racism in the very limited time that we have. Allama Tabatabai observes on this topic, he says, before the advent of Islam, 1400 years ago, slavery was practiced, or you were enslaved in 4 different ways. The first was the guardian of a family, the head of the family, was entitled to sell his children into bondage. He could sell his son, his daughter. He could sell them to someone else. Secondly, a man was entitled to sell his wife to another man. And this was practiced amongst the Arabs before the advent of Islam. Remember, this is the same Arabs that used to bury their daughters alive. The ruler could enslave whole tribes, whole clans, if he wished. He had total control. If you look at the Persians, if you look at the various empires that came up, the various rulers that came up, they were fully entitled, and they did at times enslave whole peoples. And in times of war, soldiers that were defeated could be enslaved by the victorious soldiers. So there are 4 ways that pre-Islamically people were enslaved. Upon the establishment of Islam, upon the advent of Islam, 3 of those methods were abolished straight away. The first 3. The guardian could no longer sell his children. The children were independent, they were free. If the guardian couldn't take over, the state or the Muslim Ummah would step in to help. And we discussed the responsibility of the ruler yesterday. A man could no longer sell his wife. The wife was free in her own right. And we'll come onto some of the rights of women. That's another thing, that's a finger that's pointed at us, inshallah, tomorrow. Okay? So that was abolished. He had no power to do such a thing. And thirdly, the ruler had no right over his people to enslave them and to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. In actual fact, the ruler had to abide by the rules of Islam as well. The one that it did retain, and this is where the discussion of slavery does come in both the Holy Quran and in the Hadith, and you see this sometimes mentioned in the books of fiqh, is the 4th one. In times of war, if you're victorious, you are allowed to enslave the side that you've defeated, your opponents. Now, we saw this, and this again was a finger that was pointed at Muslims and Islam. We saw this in Syria when the forces of ISIS set up slave markets for people, for women and children that they had captured. So they would kill the men and capture and take the women back and sell them in slave markets. So the question is, what is the true Islamic views on this, and why did it permit this, and is there any limitations to that? So let me try to just quickly touch on this. Allama Tabatabai points out that the justification for the 4th type, i.e. people captured in war, is presented in Surah Muhammad, which is Surah number 47, verse number 4. فَإِذَا لَقَيْتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ حَتَّى إِذَا أَثْخَنْتُمُوهُمْ فَشَدُّوا الْوَثَاقَ فَإِمَّا مِنَّا بَعْدُ وَإِمَّا فِدَاءً حَتَّى تَضَاعَ الْحَرْبُ وَأَوْزَارُهَا. So the verse says, so when you meet them in battle, who do you meet in battle? الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those that disbelieve. Remember, most of the wars of the Holy Prophet were defensive wars. He was trying to protect, and they were being attacked. Okay, and who are we talking about in this instance? The kuffar. Then smite them, i.e. fight back, defend yourself until you've overcome them, and then make them prisoners. But look at what the verse continues to say. And afterwards, either set them free as a favor, so freely set them free, let them go, or let them ransom themselves until the war terminates. So either demand a price for their freedom from their family or from themselves, or just set them free out of your goodness. Who does it say you're allowed to enslave? It is the kuffar that have come to fight with you. This whole idea that we saw with ISIS is a perversion of the religion. It's a perversion of the religion. And you can see why their imams and why their preachers and their teachers, why they keep insisting on calling everyone kuffar, because then they can justify whatever action they want. So the condition was, the verse was quite clear with regards to the kuffar. Now, when you're capturing, and as we see this today, when you're capturing soldiers from the other side, they are taken and imprisoned. This is a convention today. So this is exactly what this verse is saying. Imprison them. But you can free them or demand a ransom for them. In actual fact, the Holy Prophet quite often would say, teach 10 Muslims to read, you can go. So not even financial. He would said a very simple, we've captured you, teach 10 Muslims to read, then you are free to go. So there are restrictions. There is a philosophy, a hikmah behind why this was permitted. But there's also limitations. We can't be setting up these marketplaces. This is totally against the teachings of the Quran and the Holy Ahlul Bayt, and totally against the teachings of Islam. So what is the Islamic approach to, before we'll finish that, let's just finish that point. Islam then gives whatever little slaves that were left in the system, Islam gave the Muslims full opportunity to free them. You missed your fast, free a slave. You didn't fulfill some of your obligations in Hajj, free a slave. So these rules, that's why we find these rules in fiqh. It's not because Islam endorses the slavery process, Islam is totally against it. The only one it permitted was, we've just discussed it, was in a state of war. But even then, it says, let them go freely if you wish, or take a ransom for them. Don't hold them forever, right? So, but then he gave an opportunity. If there are slaves in the system, let them, will give you a full excuse to free them. And that's why we find these rules still in the books of fiqh. But a more fundamental question is a question of racism. And that's really that I want to spend the rest of the time on, is the question of racism. And it's racism exists across all communities. Without doubt, it exists in our community, it exists in the wider Western community. So to pretend that it doesn't exist is burying your head in the sand, effectively. There is a quite clear verse on this with regards to how we should treat people of a different color, of a different race. Surah Hujurat, which is Surah number 49, verse number 13. Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'ayban wa qaba'ilan lita'arafu inna akramakum inda Allah atqakum inna Allahu alimun khabir. O you men, surely we have created you of a male and a female, and made you tribes and families that you know each other. So when we made males and females out of different tribes, so that we know each other. If we all look the same, it's very difficult, as much as some of us want the whole world to look like us. If you look the same, it's very different to distinguish each other. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us variety. He said, men and women are different. The different tribes, the clans that you come from are different. We've made you such so that you can recognize each other. Inna akramakum, the most honorable, in the Allah, closest to Allah, ata'akum. Inna Allah alimun khabir, is the one who performs, who is careful of his duties, who adheres to taqwa. Inna Allah alimun khabir. Allah knows, He's fully aware. So the criteria that Islam provides is not which tribe I'm from, which family I'm from, what color of my skin is. The criteria is quite clear. It's taqwa. It's piety. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his last sermon in Hajj, it's well recorded, very famous sermon that he gave. He quotes this. He quoted famously this verse of the Holy Quran, and he continued. He said, "An Arab shall not be preferred to a non-Arab. A non-Arab shall not be preferred to an Arab. A black shall not be preferred to a white, and a white shall not be preferred to a black, except on the criteria of piety, and except on criteria of taqwa." The only criteria, the only way to judge amongst each other, it's not whether we're Arab or non-Arabs. Oh, Arabs say, oh, we know the Quran, we know the Hadith. The whites say, we're a superior race. No, none of those things are relevant. What is relevant is taqwa. I think I may have quoted this example a couple of weeks ago. I quite often go to pray in a mosque, it's a Sunni mosque, in a mosque in Mayfair for Salah. It's a mosque in Mayfair. So Mayfair is the most expensive part of London. And the beauty of the mosque is that when I go in there, you have in the front row, you have the cleaners that are cleaning the streets. They abandon their little trolleys, come inside. You have the traffic wardens that have been booking the cars, they're inside. You have the taxi drivers, they're inside. And quite often in the summer, not this summer because of COVID-19, but quite often in the summer, you have very rich, usually Arabs, sometimes Malaysians, at the front, coming out of the hotels, coming for Salah, also in that front row. And we're all side by side praying to the one God. What a great religion we have. That even today it can reduce, regardless of your economic status, regardless of your background, it can reduce us and put us all on the same playing field, the same level. And we all pray and then we all go back to our day-to-day tasks. You see it, I see it with my own eyes. This is Islam. There's no one who's superior from one person to another. There's Arabs, there's Africans, there's Indians, there's all different races there together. The azan is there, they're there together in a jamaat praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a beautiful, beautiful example to us all. We're not superior before God. There's no reserved seats at the front. First come, first serve. That's what the Holy Prophet was trying to give. And this is one of his famous khutbahs and it's one of his last khutbahs. In this khutbah, he famously went on saying, I'm naming two things. Quran and my Ahl Bayt. Let me quote you one other surah of the Holy Quran. This is Surah Hujurat again, Surah 49, verse number 11. And I want us to really pay attention to this surah because this addresses day-to-day racism that we have. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskhuru qawman min qawmin asa yakunu khayrun minhum wala nisa'an min nisa'in asa yakunu khayrun minhunna. Ya ayyuhal, all those who believe. So again, addressing the believers. Do not make fun of other people, of other qawms, other nations. Do not make fun. Yaskhar. And just to make sure that we understand and make this point clear, that it applies to everyone. The verse continues saying, "Wala nisa," and it addresses the women. "Wala nisa min nisa," and women do not make fun of other women because they could be better than you. You don't know. We look at other people from a distance and we assume we are superior in some way. Oh, they must be so backward. Look at their clothes. Look at how they speak. Look at how they behave. We judge people on their appearance. The criteria the Holy Prophet established is not, and I repeat, it's not their appearance. It's taqwa. It's their piety. It's their humility. It's the nur that comes from their forehead. That's what you need to judge people on. So the racism that we have in our community, the verse of the Quran is quite clear and it's addressed to the believers. Either you are a believer or you're not. And if you are a believer, then you need to adhere to the teachings and the explicit words of the Holy Quran. Do not make fun. Do not mock other nations. And specifically women. Do not mock other women. Perchance, they may be superior to you. They may be better than you. ولا تلميزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالقلب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. Do not find fault with your own people, nor call one another by nicknames. Evil is bad name after a faith. And whoever does not turn, and whoever does not do astaghfar, these are the unjust ones. Who's been addressed? The mu'mineen. Inshallah, you and I, we hope that we're part of that category. What is Allah saying? Do not make mockery of other people. They may be better than you. Or women, do not make mockery of other women. They may be better than you. Do not find fault with your own people. Amr bil Maruf, Nahy al Munkar is different, but do not find fault without reason. Repent. If you don't repent, you are from the Zalimin. You've fallen out of the fold of Al-Mu'mineen. My dear brothers and sisters, the Holy Prophet lived his teachings. And we find many examples in his life where he promoted people that were in that society considered lesser human beings. Let me quote to you the example of Ammar ibn Yasir. His mother, Sumayya, was a slave. And she bore Yasir 2 sons, Ammar and Abdullah. But under the custom of Makkah, they remained slaves. So when Yasir and Sumayya converted, they were persecuted. And they were the first shaheed in Islam. Ammar escaped by denouncing, by doing taqiyya, by saying, no, I no longer believe. That's the only reason he escaped. But this is what the Holy Prophet said about Ammar. Ammar is with the truth, and the truth is with Ammar, wherever he may be. Ammar is filled with iman from head to feet. The son of a slave. This is how the Holy Prophet is describing him. Sumayya, the first female martyr in Islam, was a slave. Oh my people, what's wrong with us? She was a slave. Islam does not give that criteria. She had the faith, she had the iman, she died, she was tortured to death, but she died with that iman and faith. Get rid of this racism. Judge each other by taqwa. Ammar was such that the Holy Prophet said, oh Ammar, you are on the haqq, and the rebellious ones will kill you. And indeed, the army of Muawiyah ibn Sufyan killed Ammar in the year 37 after Hijrah. He was fighting on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and he was martyred and he was killed. Ammar, when he was dying, asked his companions to give him some water. They brought milk to him. He started laughing. He said, why do you laugh? He said, the Holy Prophet had told me that just before I died, I'd be given milk. I'd ask for water, he'd bring me milk. Oh Ammar, come to Karbala. Come to Karbala, see Ali Akbar, who returns to his father and says, oh father, I have fought valiantly, but now thirst has overcome me. Oh Ammar, come. See the thirst of Ali Asghar. See the thirst of Sakina. And the battle of Abbas, who goes towards the waters of Euphrates. Oh Ammar, when you passed away, Amir al-Mu'mineen picked you up and put you in his lap and eulogized over you. Who is there for my Mawla Hussein when he falls? Who will put his head in his lap? Oh Ammar, come see Fatima al-Zahra. She has come and said, oh Hussein, your mother is here. Come, my son, return to me. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.